if you treat your body right and you don't act like general population, you don't become obese, you don't smoke, you don't eat too much processed foods, maybe in the weekend, a couple bites here or there, but mostly focus on food that is nutritious, and you exercise, your testosterone levels are not going to decline. Vigorous Steve here. You might have heard that serum testosterone concentrations decline by 1% for every year that you age. You might have also heard that serum testosterone concentrations decline by 1% from year to year. So that means the guy that turns your age next year has 1% less testosterone than you do this year. You might have heard that ancient man has a serum testosterone concentration of 2,000 nanograms per deciliter. You might have heard that overall fertility levels have been steadily declining for the last couple of decades. And let's say by the end of this century, all men are going to be azoospermic. You might have heard that testosterone replacement therapy and fertility medications are the end-all and be-all, the solutions of all the problems that we have nowadays, the solution for the decline in masculinity, the solution for the decline in overall testosterone levels, and the solution for basically all of the medical conditions that men have nowadays. I'm going to make this video to debunk all of that. Before we do, please like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Join the YouTube membership or the Patreon membership so you can join the Vigorous Q&A, which is every weekend, so we can chat and answer questions privately. Let's rewind the clock a little bit and discuss this ancient man that supposedly had 2,000 nanograms per deciliter under serum testosterone concentrations. Modern man, as we know it nowadays, that has a similar genetic makeup as ancient man, albeit that through evolution, right, the man that we see around us nowadays don't have the exact same similar genetic makeup as the man that lived around 80,000 to 30,000 years ago. Keep in mind that after the last ice age, which lasted approximately from 100,000 years ago up until 25,000 years ago, that slowly influenced the evolution of Homo sapiens, allowing them to migrate out of Africa, spread through Europe and the rest of the world, inventing stone tools along the way, creating artwork, increasing the overall size of their brain, which is generally associated with the development of modern man. But a study of Sierra et al., titled Craniofacial Feminization, Social Tolerance and the Origins of Behavioral Modernity, show that and speculate that the decline of testosterone is actually the reason why modern humans were able to bond on a social setting and for civilization to kind of manifest. So this is a very interesting study that goes by the cranial changes of, let's say, Neanderthals up until now, and show that as the cranials get smaller and have less of a brow and have less of a masculine feature, that this is correlated with how humans developed. And this study showed that over time, humans evolved to produce less testosterone, which makes them less aggressive, more socially tolerant. And for the guys that have ever undergone a post-cycle therapy where they were bottomed out clinically androgen deficient for a certain period of time, I'm sure you guys remember that you were very non-aggressive and very tolerant to even the most peculiarly annoying situation. Now, I don't assume that the ancient man had periods of androgen deficiency, unless that was later on in life. And when we look at the animal kingdom, the video which I produced before this one, you see that super high testosterone concentrations, at least with modern animals, is only present in cases where there's mating season, right? When we see in certain animals a serum testosterone concentration of 1,000, 1,500, 2,500, or maybe even more in the case of sharks. Now, besides making humans and animals more aggressive, especially during the mating season, but for humans it's basically always mating season, like, let's be honest, testosterone also affects how the human skull grows. And when there's high testosterone concentrations, you see that the brow ridges and other facial traits of the skull are more pronounced, more masculine, so to say. We can see this with a lot of IFB pros, especially the ones that started at an earlier age. You see that their skull is significantly different compared to general population. Why? Because their serum testosterone levels have been chronically elevated, sometimes even super physiological compared to supposedly ancient man at a serum testosterone concentration of 2,000 nanograms per deciliter. So you see that when they look at the skulls that were found at 80,000 years old and even 200,000 years old, they had a lot more masculine features, indicating that serum testosterone levels were much higher back then. And in contrast, when they look at recent skulls showing clear signs of feminization, where the male skull is actually structurally closer to the female skull compared to back then, where the skulls were significantly different because the testosterone levels were supposedly so much higher. So long story short, this study shows that men over time become more cooperative, more compliant, less aggressive, and focus more on community building. So for the guys that are currently on testosterone replacement therapy, let me ask you this. Do you feel more cooperative? Do you feel more compliant? Do you feel less aggressive? Do you focus more on community building? Well, I certainly don't. If anything, after going on testosterone replacement therapy or using performance-enhancing drugs in general, allowing me to have higher than normal testosterone concentrations, I focus on myself. I'm not very cooperative, especially not with governments. I'm not very cooperative with other people. So what I've noticed is that I'm a lot more tough in business situations, and I only associate myself with other men that also have high testosterone levels, not to the point that we're constantly fighting over the girls that we're supposedly competing for during mating season, because again, it's always mating season when it comes to humans. And when you're married, you don't really care about that kind of stuff. But still, my social connections are all revolved around men with super physiological testosterone levels. And what's very interesting, this study also showed that the migration of Africa to Europe and other parts of the world, which generally speaking have a colder climate, might be the sole reason why testosterone levels actually increased. Hypothyroidism is associated with lower free testosterone concentrations, and it's possible that the exposure to colder climates actually resulted in higher free testosterone concentrations, and cranial features became more masculine overall due to this increase in testosterone concentrations. It is said that during the colder Pleistocene climates, there might be adaptive hyperthyroidism compared to modern humans, resulting in even higher serum testosterone concentrations and even greater facial masculinity. Now, when we look at the human data of modern man, comparing different humans all over the world that live in colder climates, this evidence doesn't really seem to play out, at least with modern humans, because it seems that the face shape index is pretty much uniform all over the world right now. So that pretty much covers ancient man. Could they have higher testosterone concentrations? Potentially. But we don't have any clinical data, any reference range, any hard data regarding their serum concentrations, because we're purely basing this on their cranial features. And when you compare this to cases of modern hyperandrogenism, where men have serum testosterone concentrations of 1300 nanograms per deciliter up to 2000 nanograms per deciliter, more on that later at the end of this video, the cranial changes are simply not there, but this is usually caused by severe medical conditions like androgen insensitivity syndrome or pituitary adenomas, where the LH and FSH concentrations go so high that the testicles produce a ton of testosterone, estradiol, dihydrotestosterone, etc. Even then, the cranial changes of modern man in those medical conditions are not that substantial, not as substantial as acromegaly, for example, where growth hormone concentrations are chronically elevated throughout life, which is significantly shortened in those conditions. We could say that patients suffering from acromegaly look very similar to Neanderthals or ancient man. So there might be something to say for that. Maybe ancient man, besides elevated testosterone concentrations, also had elevated growth hormone concentrations. And well, let's look at the modern IFBB pros on a ton of testosterone and a ton of growth hormone. That's very close to acromegaly and very close to the cranials of ancient man. Let's move forward in time a little bit to the earliest evidence of serum testosterone concentrations. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find hard evidence of the earliest known instances of serum testosterone. Again, back in the day, in the late 1930s, the German scientist Adolf Butenandt and Croatian-Swiss scientist Leopold Ruzicka did a lot of the early work on human sex hormones, being testosterone, estrogens, DHT, etc. They actually shared the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1939 for their independent work on these sex hormones. Now, they did a lot of studies back in the day. Most of them are not translated, so they're either in German or Swiss, which showed serum testosterone concentrations. In many cases, that was determined in cases of androgen deficiency, or some of the measuring units were not exactly up to standards of what we would consider nowadays to be sufficient, right? They use different testing parameters or methods of analysis. So I'm not exactly sure, or I can't exactly find these studies and quote them for you guys. If anybody can find these studies, please link them down below. I did a whole day of research trying to piece that together, but unfortunately I couldn't find them. I found a very early clinical reference range of the 1940s, again, with no real citation or reference. So I can't post it on the screen, unfortunately. But then one of those studies showed that the examined reference range was between 300 to 1100 nanograms per deciliter, which is very similar to the modern reference range we use nowadays. So if anybody can find it, please link it down below. I would love to know what the earliest serum testosterone concentrations of man actually are. Assuming that they're not androgen deficient, obviously, because one of the values that I was able to find showed 86 nanograms per deciliter, which is clearly very, very low and not very representative of what ancient man supposedly had. Let's look at the current evidence. That's more exciting, and it actually shows a steep decline in serum testosterone concentrations. One study from 2007 performed by Anderson et al. Titled Secular Decline in Male Testosterone and Sex Hormone Binding Globulin Serum Levels in a Danish population survey. I'll link it down below. This one showed that serum testosterone levels decreased and SHBG levels increased with age. But that's not just the age of the sample group. With each different sample group, you see that testosterone levels got lower and lower and lower, and SHBG levels got higher and higher and higher. I'll put all of the data on the screen so you guys can follow along. More recently born studied men showed a significant secular trend in the decline of testosterone and increased SHBG levels among different age groups compared to men who were born earlier. So the later you're born, the lower your serum testosterone levels are going to be. And this is actually the study where that 1% decline actually comes from. So there is some merit to using that as a data point. This study showed that the estimated age-related decline in serum testosterone on average varied between 0.7 to 1% per year of age. The most steep decline happened between 30 to 40 years old. So you could say, based on this study, that if you're over 30 years old, leading into 40 years old, this is the most likely time that you would result in testosterone replacement therapy, because again, your testosterone levels are going to decline by 0.7 to 1% every year. Now, how much that actually feels like, I'm not exactly sure. I did my serum testosterone levels from the age of, 16 or 17 up until the age of 26. And it was very hard to quantify how much of a difference I felt between 800 nanograms per deciliter up until 630 nanograms per deciliter. Now, again, that's not the age 30 to 40, because by that time, I'm already hormonized or using HCG monotherapy or HCG and HMG for fertility purposes. Still, I think it's very difficult to actually feel what this 1% decline actually feels like and how this affects your libido, mood, well-being, etc. Maybe one day to the next, you just feel horrible, you go in for blood work, and then see if there's some merit to testosterone replacement therapy. Now, when this is compared to the age period model, so you take different age cohorts of people of the same age that were born later, you see that there's a decline of 0.5 to 0.7% per year of age. So as men are born later, for that same age, so let's say comparing 40 years old to 40 years old, but there's a 10-year age difference. For every year of an age difference, there's a 0.5 to 0.7% decline in testosterone levels and an increase in SHBG levels. Unfortunately, this study didn't show the body mass index, which changed over these different age groups over time. So this is also something you have to think about, right? How you treat your body is also very important, because, body fat levels that increase in your overall nutrient intake, that might decrease with time, right? People eat more processed foods nowadays. So all of these things kind of factor into it. Even though some studies showed or speculated that lifestyle-related changes weren't the actual sole determining factor of this testosterone level decreasing. And that's the exact overlying arch of the following study performed by Travison et al. Also in 2007, titled A Population-Level Decline in Serum Testosterone Levels in American Men. This study showed a substantial age-independent decrease in total testosterone levels that doesn't seem to be attributed to explanatory factors like health or lifestyle characteristics such as smoking or obesity, for example. They showed a population-level decline. So that means that amongst the entire population of American men studied, testosterone levels went down. And it doesn't have to be attributed to an age level decline where as you get older, your total testosterone levels are going to go down anyway. Your SHBG levels steadily increase like they observed with the Finnish study. So they couldn't really explain why. And the entire sample size of this study was a significant amount of people. 52% of the subjects of this study reported at least one chronic illness. 25% were currently smokers at the time that this study was performed. 22% were considered to be obese with a body mass index over 30. Now, a body mass index over 30 is a little bit of rudimentary form to determine obesity because, well, my body mass index is over 30, but I think only my biceps are obese. So take it with a grain of salt. And 22% of the people in the study reported to use at least three prescription medications. So a large portion of the people in the study were not considered to be quote unquote healthy, like we would expect from people in the fitness community. And even though a decent amount of people in the fitness community use prescription medications, that's kind of to mitigate the deleterious effects that we subject ourselves to from the use of performance-enhancing drugs. Now, based on this study, they showed that regardless if people were healthy or unhealthy, there was a steep decline in testosterone levels. And that also shows that they don't really know exactly what is going on. Is it related to nutrition intake? Is it related to stress? Is there some environmental pollutants that are going on? And before you start screaming vaxxed, again, this is from 2007, right? Well before the economic crisis of 2008, 2009, certainly well before of what is going on nowadays. So you can't use that as an excuse. But the study also noted that there was an age-specific increase in obesity levels. So along the 20 years that this study was performed during multiple follow-ups, people got fatter and they were also prescribed more medications. So the polypharmacy also went up. Now, at least during this time, a lot of people, the subject of this study, who smoked cigarettes declined dramatically in all age groups. So people smoked less or smoked less cigarettes. But keep in mind that body weight gain, smoking cessation, and the use of prescription medications are all related and associated with a decrease in testosterone levels. So, a long story short, to summarize this study, the findings over the last 20 years showed a substantial age-independent decrease in testosterone levels, but it didn't appear to be of consequence and related to trends in health or lifestyle amongst American men. And the authors of this study hypothesize that the age-matched decline in testosterone levels amongst age groups which are grouped together could be due to undocumented influence on health or environmental factors. So long story short, even though it's very clear that testosterone levels are declining, they don't know why. They don't exactly know why, because whether you're healthy or unhealthy, testosterone levels are going down. So that's a little bit concerning to see. They didn't give hard numbers regarding the overall percentages of a decline of testosterone levels per year or amongst age groups, year by year. So again, it's a very notable thing, but still, this is among general population. Both studies in Finland and America were amongst general population. And well, do you associate with general population? I certainly don't. So let's look at the military data. There's actually been a lot of studies performed on military personnel of the United States regarding their body composition and their anthropometric measurements. We're going to combine three sources for this next segment. The first one being a book of 1990 called Body Composition and Physical Performance Applications for the Military Services. In chapter 3, they have a whole graph of multitude different years with large sample sizes of the military at that time. That chapter is called Body Composition and Military Performance, the Origins of the Army Standards. And then there's two follow-up studies. One is performed by Gordon et al. In 2012 called the Answer 2 Anthropometric Survey of the U.S. Army Personnel. And then another study of 2019 of Shams White et al. Titled Comparisons of Anthropometric Measurements in the U.S. Army Personnel in Classification of Overweight and Obesity. Now, you might recognize this table from chapter 3 of the 1990s book for military personnel, because Derek, for More Plates, More Dates, also used this data to show you guys that your grandfather probably didn't have a serum testosterone level of 2,000 nanograms per deciliter. I just added the data from 2012 and 2019 alongside of this, so we have a little bit more data to pull from and compare the last 160 years, what has happened to military personnel in the United States. So let's start with 1864, a sample size of 23,600 military men. The average age at that time was about 25 to 26 years old, which is very similar to the follow-up studies performed, except the one from 2012, where the average age was approximately 30 years old. In 1864, the average body weight of a military man in the United States was 140 pounds, with an estimated body fat of about 17%, giving a fat-free mass of about 117 pounds. That's quite light, but at least amongst all these 23,600 men, they were doing physical exercise. Their diet was very similar. Of course, the stressful environment was all similar, so at least we have a sample size with a similar lifestyle. Now, keep in mind that the average life expectancy back then was only 35 to 40 years old. So the average age of the military personnel, that means that they were only 10 to 15 years away from death. This was also during the time that there was an American Civil War, and most of these studies that have been performed on military personnel have all been performed during a specific war. For example, the study performed in 1919 with a sample size of almost 100,000 military men that was performed during the First World War. And during this time, there was also a Spanish flu epidemic, which during certain periods of time actually lowered the average life expectancy. During this time, around the 1920s, the average life expectancy was 53 to 55 years old. The average weight of the military men was 145 pounds, so that's, let's say, 4 or 5 pounds heavier than the previous study. The average age was 25 years old. Estimated body fat levels was about 16%, so it went down with about 1%, and their fat-free mass went up to approximately 122 pounds on average, an increase of 5 pounds. The neck girth and the chest girth went up with about half an inch, but the waist girth actually went down with a tenth of an inch, so that is of note. Now, as you go further down the timeline, you see that neck girth and chest girth slowly increases, and at least until 1984, during the time of the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, and the ongoing Cold War, the estimated body fat levels went down, and the waist girth also went down. Now, in 1984, there was a very small sample size of only 870 men with an average age of 26 years old. Keep in mind that the estimated body fat percentage at that time was 17%, so that's very close to what was established in 1864, albeit again on a smaller sample size. But the fat-free mass is significantly higher because the average weight of military personnel is also significantly higher. At that time of 1984, the average life expectancy was already 73 to 74 years old. And when you fast forward to 2012, a sample size of about 4,000 military men, the average weight is 188 pounds. The estimated body fat levels was unfortunately undetermined, and I'll link all of the scientific evidence down below. It was simply not there in the data, but when you look at the waist girth, 37 inches. So I don't know what happened there in 2012. It was post 9/11, the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq was taking place. But still, amongst all the men that were surveyed at that time, I'm not exactly sure how many of them were deployed, because a waist girth of 37 inches, yeah, that's a little bit higher than, the military men compared to the other wars where these studies were performed. And when we look at a sample size of about 400 men performed between 2014 and 2017, specifically looking for cases of obesity amongst military personnel, you see that their waist girth is 35 inches with an estimated body fat percentage of about 20%, a body mass index of 26.3. So the average life expectancy of that time is still 79 years old. And this was during the time of the intervention of the war in northwest Pakistan and Iraq, which is still ongoing. So when you look at this data, where the variables of the sample size are a little bit more tightly controlled, because the military controls the diet of the military personnel, the military controls the circadian rhythm of the military personnel, they're all in a similar stress-free or stressful environment, whether they're deployed or not. And of course, a lot of the vices the general population have and can subject themselves to, I don't think that military personnel has access to that. So regarding of how these men behave and how their lifestyle is, it's all very similar. And what we can draw a conclusion is that body weight is going up, life expectancy is going up, assuming that nobody's getting killed in action. Neck girth, chest girth, that's all going up. Unfortunately, waist girth is also going up, especially after 2012. And overall, the estimated body fat percentage over the last 160 years did go up, but not substantially. Fat-free mass did go up. So, with a rudimentary conclusion based on this data, judging on the army personnel, I would not say that serum testosterone levels are declining, but obesity levels and overall body weight levels are certainly going up. Now, how would US military personnel of 2017 fare against the military personnel of 1864? Place your bets down below and we'll draw the conclusion out of that. I think that military personnel of this age is a lot more powerful, a lot more manly, and a lot more effective in killing than military personnel of 1864. Now, I know it's a little bit rudimentary because none of these studies actually included serum testosterone concentrations of military personnel. We don't know the range, we don't know the mean, we don't know the average, we don't know the exact nanograms per deciliter in serum. And well, let's be honest, in 1864, they didn't even know how to determine serum testosterone concentrations because the testing equipment and methods were not there. They only know how to determine testosterone concentrations after 1938 or 1939. So take it with a grain of salt. Still, it's an interesting method of observation. Keep in mind that it's not approved to use testosterone replacement therapy in most divisions of the US military. And again, I could be mistaken because I have helped a couple guys on TRT that was actually part of the military, but it's generally not prescribed for military personnel. Personally, if I had a country, if I was a king or a dictator or whatever form of leadership, all of my men in the military would be on testosterone replacement therapy, besides the go pills, which are readily used, especially during flying, for example, long flights. They would have go pills which contain amphetamines. I believe my military would definitely be on some performance-enhancing drugs because my military would be out to win any battle. Okay, with that out of the way, let's move over to recent times and discuss modern hyperandrogenism. A study from 2021 performed by Filatova et al. Titled Features of Hyperandrogenism in Men. Keep in mind this is a Russian study and I had to use Google Translator to translate this to English. So there might be a little bit of loss of data here, but I believe, based on several Russian friends who I asked to compare the Russian study to the English translation, it seems to be reasonably accurate, at least accurate enough to draw some conclusions from. Let's focus on group 1 to 3, which all had an increased and elevated level of total testosterone, which various levels of SHBG and DHT concentrations. It is of note that the men from group 1 were significantly different from the men in group 2 or 3. Group 1 was generally overweight. They had an increase in prostate volume, and they were also significantly older. Still, I pulled group 1, 2, 3 together to get an average range of these sex hormones. You see that in all cases of hyperandrogenism among these three groups, excluding group 4, total testosterone ranged from 1,000 nanograms to 1,240 nanograms per deciliter, give or take, with a mean of 1,080 nanograms per deciliter. Free testosterone concentrations had a range of about 120 to 320 picograms per deciliter, with a mean of about 235 picograms per deciliter. Total dihydrotestosterone concentrations had a range of 645 to 3,620 picograms per milliliter. This is probably where some of the androgenetic alopecia and the hair loss was stemming from. A mean of 1,430 picograms per milliliter. And their SHBG levels ranged from 23 to 91 nanomoles per liter, with a mean concentration of 47 nanomoles per liter, which is already towards the top of the range for adult men. Keep in mind that SHBG levels are heavily correlated to your libido, and the higher your SHBG is, generally speaking, the worse your libido is as well. You need a certain amount of free testosterone for your libido to be stimulated. Now, that doesn't mean you get to crush your SHBG levels into single digits, because then your libido is also very, very low, as many of you guys have observed during a steroid cycle where your SHBG levels are basically bottomed out. There's an ideal range. For most men on TRT, that's approximately 20 to 30 nanomoles per liter. And I would say that for drug-free, anywhere below 35 nanomoles per liter seems to be ideal. Again, it's a little bit rudimentary because everybody feels slightly different based on their total testosterone levels in relation to their SHBG levels. Still, if you're somewhere in the middle of the range, I would say that that's favorable for your libido. And you see here that it's a very cruel joke of nature. And what I see over and over again on blood work results of men that have supraphysiological testosterone concentrations produced endogenously, so over 1,000 nanograms per deciliter coming straight from their own testicles, SHBG levels sky high. So even though you would say on paper, well, a total testosterone concentration of 1,000 or maybe even 1,300 nanograms per deciliter, I would like some of that. Guess what? SHBG coming from your liver is going to be high also, so your libido is not going to be significantly higher either. Now, amongst all of these men who are hyperandrogenic, there was a high instances of acne, androgenic alopecia, hair loss, slight chances of prostate enlargement. Gynecomastia symptoms were not investigated because the estradiol levels were unknown, not investigated in this study. But still, for all of the guys who are begging, asking, wanting super high testosterone levels, it will come with side effects, man. It will come with acne, hair loss, and prostate enlargement, or at least super high SHBG levels binding all of that precious testosterone up, and you don't even get increased levels of libido. Now, further down the line, when you look at men with super high testosterone levels due to partial or complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, this study from 2015 performed by Hellman et al. Titled Male Patients with Partial Androgen Insensitivity Syndrome, a Longitudinal Follow-up of Growth, Reproductive Hormones, and the Development of Gynecomastia, showed that men that are insensitive to androgens, so the testosterone, the dihydrotestosterone, are not exactly coming to the androgen receptor to potentiate all of their effects. In this specific medical condition, you see that men are more susceptible to the formation of gynecomastia. Now, again, this doesn't really represent the general population who are not insensitive to androgens. I'm certainly not insensitive to androgens, whether that's from endogenous production or exogenous sources. Those androgens always come to the receptor and potentiate their effects. It is funny of note that this study showed in one patient, he had a total testosterone concentration of 1,970 nanograms per deciliter at the age of 25. His estradiol at that time was about 66 picograms per milliliter, so that's not exactly gynecomastia territory. His SHBG was still 80 nanomoles per liter. So again, high testosterone levels, high SHBG levels. So this is actually very close to the total testosterone concentrations which ancient man supposedly had. Ancient man had 2,000 nanograms per deciliter, and modern man, only in cases of androgen insensitivity syndrome, can get 2,000 nanograms per deciliter naturally. Keep in mind that the average life expectancy of ancient man was, 20 to 25 years old, and later in the Bronze Age, maybe 30 to 45 years old. So this guy that is 25 years old with 2,000 nanograms per deciliter at 2015 is probably, 33 years old now, and maybe found a way around his androgen insensitivity syndrome. Still, I would say that this modern guy is well ahead compared to ancient man regarding his life and the overall facilities that we have access to nowadays. I found another study which I quickly want to mention, performed by Orsted et al. In 2014, titled Plasma Testosterone in General Population, Cancer Prognosis and Cancer Risk, a prospective cohort study. This showed that for men, a doubling of testosterone was not associated with a risk of the majority of cancer types, with the only exception that the risk for oral cancer in men was increased compared to the other cancer forms. So if your testosterone levels double, you have a higher risk to develop oral cancer, and whether that's in the esophagus or somewhere in the mouth, that wasn't really specified. Still, that is of note. And for women, there was generally no evidence of an association between testosterone and the risk of any cancer types, even though a doubling of testosterone levels So again, ladies, keep in mind, don't start doubling your testosterone just haphazardly, because there's a risk for either bladder or liver cancer. So besides the risk for oral cancer, you can basically safely increase your total testosterone levels if you want to, without an increased risk of cancer. Still, you would still need to do your cancer marker screening, because let's be honest, nobody just goes in testosterone. You go in testosterone, growth hormone, and whatever else. Testosterone increasing estrogen levels in combination with growth hormone, that's probably highly prolific for tumors and cancer forms. Okay, I'll leave it here regarding the data. It was very interesting to piece all of this together. I would not say that you can use all of this data as a justification to go on TRT or to haphazardly increase your testosterone levels. But if you want to, by your own choice, feel free to do so. It's your body. All you have to do is not treat it like a dumpster. If you treat it like a dumpster, your testicles are not going to reward you with adequate testosterone. And that's the overlying arch of the last couple of videos. If you treat your body right, and you don't act like general population, you don't become obese, you don't smoke, you don't eat too much processed foods, maybe in the weekend, a couple bites here or there, but mostly focus on food that is nutritious, and you exercise, your testosterone levels are not going to decline. Really. All the consultations that I have with men with subclinical or low testosterone concentrations, they do one of these or a multitude of these. They're stressed, poor nutrition, non-exercising, obese, recreational drugs, alcohol, smoking, etc., right? They don't treat their body well. Honestly, guys, if you treat your body well, I don't think you're going to have subclinical testosterone levels. And if you do everything right and it's still subclinical, right? You do your blood work and you show that it's just not improving. Okay, you have my absolute 100% blessing to go on TRT. And if you can't get it medically prescribed from a doctor in your area, you can't go the legal route, take matters into your own hands. You already proved to yourself that you became 100% healthy, right? Your blood work shows that you're healthy. The only marker that is off is your testosterone, right? You're on top of your nutrients, you're on top of your training, your diet is on point, you're sleeping to your circadian rhythm, you're taking all of these supplements, you're doing your icing in the testicles, you've done everything already. You've done everything you possibly can to increase your testosterone levels, and your testicles or your pituitary are still uncooperative. Okay, go on TRT, man. You've earned it. You've earned it. You're so healthy now. You've done everything you can. And guess what? Guess who's not going to get all of the side effects that everybody else on TRT is getting, right? You're not going to get the acne because you're eating clean. You're not going to get hair loss because you're supplying all of the micronutrients that would contribute to the growth of hair. You're not going to get gynecomastia because your body fat levels are low and you're on top of all of the nutrients. You're excluding all of the phytoestrogens. You're not going to get any of it. And if you do, it's manageable. All right, this video is way too long. I hope it was entertaining. I hope you learned something new. If you did, let me know down below in the comment section. If you want to use TRT, if you want to use steroids, just admit to it. I want to use steroids. I don't care what ancient man had or what modern man has or what hyperandrogenistic people have. I want my testosterone levels to be out of the reference range because I've earned it. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the YouTube description section. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at VigorSteve. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A front double bicep for you guys. Not quite 2,000 nanograms per deciliter, but I will say that looking at myself now that the testosterone is out, clear signs of cranial feminization. I do like my face a lot better on cycle. I know a lot of you guys comment here or there, Steve, you look younger, your face looks streamlined, but I prefer the hyperandrogenic Batman jawline, a nice thick jaw that could bite through wood, but that is going to be off the menu for the next couple of months because, well, somebody needs to get pregnant, and with testosterone in my system, that's probably not going to happen. So I guess for the next couple of months, I'll be more cooperative and socially compliant. But I can't wait for Neanderthal Steve to come back and be non-cooperative, non-compliant, highly aggressive, or at least in the gym, kick ass, and chew bubble gum. And I'm all out of gum. I'll leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next one.